So welcome to our non-traditional presentation for the day for week 5 of MUNUC Academy. Today we're going to be talking about front rooms, directives, and breaking into front room. All right, a little bit about myself. My name is Julian Tucker. I am the Undersecretary General for Hybrid Committees at MUNUC 37. I have served as a CD in the past, a chair in the past, and of course an AC a long while ago. So I do have experience with many facets of Model UN, especially Munich. I am a senior at the University of Chicago, majoring in history and political science. Um, that's sort of all that you need to know about me. That's who I am. That's me, as you can see. All right. If you guys have any questions um, that pop up during the presentation, you can feel free to put them in the Q&A section, and then we will get to them at the end. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself? Or my thing is
You hear me
yours?
now?
Oh yeah, now you're good. Yeah.
Okay, hello. My name is Kate. I am the member at large for Munich. Last year, I actually had Julian's job, so Julian's actually my little baby. Though we sort of met because we were on the same MUN committee and first year, so kind of more like my brother. I don't know. Anyway, I hosted one of these I think last week, and it's nice if you are back. Hello again. Wilson and I were doing that last one, and we yapped for a long time. I think Julian is more succinct than us, but I may be helping Julian. I don't really know. So Julian may involve me, Julian may not. So yes,
It's always good to
yay!
have more perspectives.
Yes, get excited,
With
get excited.
Yeah, I hope you guys are excited, even though I can't see you all. I hope you're smiling behind your computer screens. All right, let's get into our content for the day. What are we going to talk about for week 5 of MUNIC Academy? First, we're going to talk about non-traditional front room, or non-tred as we like to call it. We're going to talk about directives. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to break into front room through your crisis notes. Let's jump straight in. All right, non-traditional front room. Refresher, what is the difference between front room and back room? Front room is where you, the delegates, will sort of be the entire time. You will never go into the back room. It may sound very mysterious, but it is just a room. It's not some sort of smoke-filled, mysterious place where the magic happens. It's just a room that you don't get to see. Front room follows parliamentary procedure. You guys will be giving speeches about various topics, and you guys will be collaborating with each other on directives and perhaps other things. Um, CDs and ACs will come in periodically to do note runs and also to present crisis breaks. And your biggest goal um, as a non-traditional delegate in the front room is simply to pass directives that solve the issues presented at hand. Obviously, as a hybrid USG and Kate as a former hybrid USG, if you're in a hybrid committee, you will also be passing resolutions, which are slightly different from directives, but the parliamentary procedure is more or less the same. In backroom, this is sort of what really makes non-traditional committees non-traditional. It's what makes them special. This is where the backing marks are built through the delegate notes that you send in and then get responses from. Some of your notes might even make it into a crisis break, which is very exciting and a cool thing. It really feels very rewarding. And your goal through the backroom is to influence the committee and progress whatever the individual goals of your delegate may be. Um, what is the front room? As we just said, front room is where delegates engage in moderated and unmoderated debate and respond to the crisis break through directives. It is driven by the crisis cycle, um, and it is always evolving in response to delegate actions in the back room. And we'll sort of get into more about how that works later on. What happens in the front room? Um, you can have moderated debate. This is a motion for debate and speeches moderated by the chair. The way this will work, this may have been covered already, so I apologize if you guys have already heard this in a previous lesson. A delegate may motion for, say, they'll say a 6:30 on the crisis break, and that means the moderated caucus will be 6 minutes long and there will be 30-second speaking time. That means the chair will be called on 12 speakers throughout that moderated caucus. It doesn't have to be six, but the form in which the motion is made is the length of the moderated caucus and then the length of the speaking time. So it can be a 6:30, a 7:45, etc. The math should divide properly, but that's not important for here. There are also unmoderated caucuses. As the name indicates, this is not moderated by your chair. You sort of get up and walk around and find people to work with on directives. There is also a thing called a gentleman's or strong woman's unmod, in which you cannot get up from your chair, but you have an unmoderated caucus. Those are pretty rare. And Kate, have you ever seen a gentleman's unmod in your time as a USG or a chair?
Not in Munich, but I think they're pretty commonplace on like the college circuit. If people are trying to finish up their notes while like also discussing some issue. So that could be like a viable thing. Like say your chair says like, oh, like you only have like 2 more minutes before the note run, but you're kind of like in a dead zone, like maybe like the directive just passed, like you have a while.
Oops.
They can be like, oh, motion for like a 2 minutes gentleman unmod, and then you can just work on your notes, sit down and like kind of chat. Are you gonna mention round robins, Julie?
Round robins are, if you motion, they're the most common round robin I've heard was a 30-minute, or no, it's not 30, sorry, God forbid, 30-second round robin. Actually, the way that works is, as you can see in this slide right here, this is the anatomy of the non-traditional front room. So you have the dais, that's the chair. There may be a front room AC there, but that depends on the detail. And then you can see all the delegates are sort of in a semicircle. And the way a round robin works is you will go through, every delegate will give a speech on the topic. One by one, you'll sort of make your way around this table. So that's more common, I would say, than a gentleman's unmod. They're certainly not very frequent, but I would not be surprised if at the beginning of committee maybe, or after a very sort of significant break where you really want to get the sense of where every delegate is at the moment, that is something that can be done and is certainly done. I remember from my time as a chair, we definitely did have round robins every so often. This, of course, you're looking at right now is the non-trad front room. This is a real life MUNIC committee from MUNIC 36. This is what it will look like. There's the chair. Then you guys are going to be sitting in sort of a semicircle around the chair. There's enough space to write, debate, collaborate with other delegates. Everybody has enough space to work together. Generally, on non-traditional committees, there are around 25 delegates. Sometimes there'll be a little fewer. This year, we have a couple committees that are going up to 30, but that will still, the layout and the anatomy of the non-traditional front room will still be the same, more or less. Directives. All right, so that concludes our part about non-traditional Parley Pro and how it works. Now we're going to move into directives, which is, of course, the main goal for what you are supposed to be doing in front room. So what is a directive? A directive is a short-run document that addresses the crisis facing committee. Multiple delegates may are in fact encouraged to work on a merged directive. As opposed to crisis notes that are kept secret, directives are public, so you cannot do anything sort of behind the scenes in a directive. You could try to sneak in a clause and hope that people don't catch it, but that probably won't work because the chair always reads the directives aloud, so don't really try. Another thing about multiple directives may and are encouraged to work together. The chair may, up to their discretion, they may set a directive cap, which means they might not be taking more than 3 or 4 directives. And they may also set a page cap for the directives that are submitted. So if you're merging your directives, we highly encourage you not to just have everybody work on their own directive and then staple your directives into one mega directive. That's quite common. I remember on the collegiate circuit as a college crisis director, I once received a photo of a directive with 28 clauses, which was not amazing. And that hopefully does not happen. Don't try to do that. If you do, your chair will probably not react super well to that. All right. Just a review of what the crisis cycle looks like in order to understand where directives fit into that. First, Backroom delivers the crisis break. Well, you'll usually get a couple issues that you have to respond to. Then, through a mixture of moderated and unmoderated caucuses, delegates will debate solutions to those issues presented in the break, and they will eventually write directives responding to the break. It may be you only need one moderated caucus and one unmoderated caucus to come up with directives. It may be that you need multiple of both. But hopefully at the end of that time, you guys are writing directives responding to the break. Then obviously you move into voting procedure. Those directives are submitted to the dais. And then there are usually speeches given for and against each directive, and then those directives are voted on. At the same time, you're also writing your crisis notes, and there will be periodically, usually at a time that's hopefully convenient, you will be turning in your notepad and then receiving another note, because MUNUC uses a 2 notepad system. So you'll always have one notepad with you where you're writing, then you'll always have a notepad that is in the back room being responded to. Usually the note runs should happen in the middle of between the crisis break and the voting procedure, although sometimes you can get a little messy. All right. After you vote and pass directives, Backroom creates a new break responding on delegate actions, including the directives that have just been passed, and perhaps potentially later on in committee, the notes that you guys are working on. Now back to directives, elements of a directive. You can see there's always a title, the name of the directive, signatories. These are usually they're usually sponsors and signatories. These are the delegates who are sort of putting their name forward in support of a directive and want to see it debated. Generally, as a chair, there will be a minimum number of sponsors and signatories needed, and that is usually up to the chair's discretion where to set that, and they will adjust those numbers based on the frequency and the amount of directives they're getting. Oh, never mind. MUNUC does not do sponsors. We only do signatories. Sorry, I did not read that. As you can see, there are various clauses and subclauses to each directive. An important thing that I would point out in when you look clearly at this directive is that each clause and subclause uses very active language. So recruit, focus, deploy, focus again, allow. So this is all, there's no sort of expressing our concern at this or that. It's all sort of very active language, because ultimately the more sort of concise a directive is, the better, basically. You don't need to use a lot of words for no reason. If the goal of committee can be expressed in fewer words, that's always better for everyone involved. Kate, do you have any opinions or experiences on what makes a good versus less good directive?
Yes. So like look into like your CD's mind when they're trying to make like these breaks. A lot of the time what they're doing is they're looking at your directives and they're being like, oh, what did they like forget to do? So make sure that like if you have something in your directive, like it has like a like it there's like no loose ends and things like that. Like make sure everything like is connected as well. I know like 3 pages, like if there's like a cap or something, can seem like there's not a lot of space, but like make sure to prioritize that sort of thing. And then like if like you have something in your directive that can go in someone else's directive, like potentially talk to them about it. So that way like you don't miss that like crucial like space. Just make sure that like you don't leave too many loopholes, especially also with like funding and stuff like that. Because your CDs will exploit that to make it in the break. And like while it is fun, sometimes it's slightly annoying. So make sure that like you try to include like as much like information as possible to like avoid those loopholes. Uh let's see. Also, please get someone with like neat handwriting to write it. Because
Yeah,
like
as a if we can't read your handwriting, we will make the delegate who wrote that come up and read it. Like it has been done before, it will be done in the future probably. Chairs know
yes.
they can do this. Um, Even for you, we'll get to notes later, but try to write in clear handwriting. I know sometimes RACs don't always have the cleanest handwriting, so it does go both ways. But yes, good handwriting is surprisingly important in uh, Module 1 because we are a computer-free
Yes, it is.
setting.
Also,
Yeah.
like if you see on the directive, like they sort of underline what's going on. If something is like particularly important, you may consider doing that so that way like your CD takes note of that and can like put something in the break being like, oh yeah, and this problem is solved. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have, okay, some directive writing tips. So title should be short, explanatory, and creative. With titles, they can be quite a good way to draw attention amongst other delegates to what your directive is trying to do, and it can be sort of a nice, snappy way to sort of brand yourself. Certainly for the CD, looking at the directive, they probably are not going to really look at the titles, but this shouldn't keep you from sort of having fun with your directives. Before you actually start putting, pen to paper, quite literally speaking, you should think about what the different clauses of the directive are going to be and what you want it to accomplish. Have a sense of what you want to do, um, because it's never a good thing with any writing thing. I know somebody who writes a lot of papers, just start putting words onto a page and seeing where it goes. Like you always should have an outline of what you want to accomplish before you actually put pen to paper. Obviously, there's quite a compressed timeline, so there's not a ton of time to really go through the outline in your head, but it is something that is quite valuable. Always leave some space on the page for other delegates to add on or for merging, especially if there is a page cap on directives, which there may be. Um, for more about mergers, I encourage you to tune back in week 6, which is not next week. It's actually in the beginning of January because of our schedule. But yeah, those are some helpful. This is a good way to sort of start, as you can see, this example outline. Um, Generally, try to avoid going too far. Don't have like sub clauses. Maybe as like a Roman numeral I is okay, but don't try to have too many because that can get quite frustrating for the chair, for the crisis director, for the other delegates. All right. Now, with directives covered, how do you actually influence the content that is in that the directives are responding to? So how do you break into just to review, crisis breaks, also called crisis updates, sort of, or just updates, are basically how committee moves forward. So every 45 minutes or so, ideally, the backroom staff, that's the CD and the ACs, will come present a new crisis or new series of crises, especially as the committee goes on, for the committee to solve. Um, with the exception of the initial breaks in committee and price sectors may have later on things that they want to add in that they've been planning for. Most crisis breaks are delegate driven, meaning they're either driven by what delegates are doing in front room through directives or what delegates are doing through backroom with notes. So when an action you took through your backroom note appears in the front room, that means delegations because your arc has been broken by backroom. Give yourself a pat on the back. Um, that being said, don't expect them to, in fact, you shouldn't want the crisis director to say, this action that we just broke that is emergency they have to solve has been caused by this delegate, because that would basically put you in a lot of trouble. Um, Sometimes towards the very, very end, delegates may want to have their identity behind certain breaks revealed, but that's really when you're getting into like crunch time. Because if you're working against committee, as we'll get into, you're probably not going to want your motives and identity to be revealed. Um, Factors to consider: how does your arc fit into the flow of committee? So what are sort of the topics and issues at hand, and how can your goals uh, interact with the issues that are at hand? And does your arc disrupt committee in a significant way? Um, if I'm trying to think of an example, um, if your committee is about the unification of Yugoslavia and your arc is I want to help unite Yugoslavia, that may be a arc that you can certainly try to do, but it is less likely to break into Frontroom because it is simply going along with the goals, with what the goals of committee generally are. So generally, um, if your arc goes against what committee the stated aims of committee and Frontroom are, it's more likely to break in and disrupt. There's always sort of a communist arc. That's the most common one. A lot of people like to do religions or cults. Kate, do you have any memories of any fun uh, disruptive arcs that you would like to share?
Yeah, this wasn't Munich because I've never been a crisis director for Munich. But there was this one arc in Choman where my committee was Antarctica, and like dividing up Antarctica. And this guy's like whole arc was literally like creating this like mega penguin. So like the, the entire thing was him being like, oh, like there's penguins all over. I need to like unify them somehow. So like he found out a way to like unify the penguins, and then like they like amassed into like this like mega penguin. So like it's like if you've ever seen Gravity Falls, like the like mega gnome. Yeah, yeah, okay. I'm aging myself here. Uh, but basically, like in future crisis breaks, like because that mega penguin existed and he was like using it to like carry out his ends, like there was almost always like a segment on like where in Antarctica is the mega penguin, like what is the mega penguin doing? So like if you create something that like is like kind of unavoidable like that, that could be a good way of breaking in the Frontroom.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of stuff that might seem silly at first. I remember when in our collegiate conference, the committee was medieval Burgundy, and in one delegate's bio, there had been sort of the last sentence at the end, sort of a throwaway. This person likes breeding dogs in their spare time, which is just hobby that some people like to throw into their bios. And this person made their art. They basically created these giant Clifford the Red Dog type things. I hope you guys know what Clifford the giant red dog is. And he had his giant red dogs attack various seats of government in powerful places. That was a fun, I think they attacked the Vatican maybe. Um, so don't feel like your arc has to be all the time super serious and ideologically pure and you're rallying the masses. Like you can have some fun. This is Munich. Like it's serious. We need to learn about the issues, but then the day we also need to learn and have fun. So don't be too afraid of doing some silly stuff. Um, One crisis arc, think about obviously through reading the background guide, because this will be apparently it will become apparent. What are the main themes or problems facing that committee? Whether it's a question of how separatism, how unified the government should be. Um, you're when you read their background guides, your execs will hopefully they will be pretty explicit about what the main issues facing committee are. So try to think when you read the background guides and when you're reading your bio, what would my character's position be on these issues, and where could I find a wedge to sort of gain my way into there? And then think about, does your arc make sense for the setting or with the portfolio power? So obviously this is quite an obvious example. If you are a knight on a medieval committee, you're not going to focus on conquering Mars. You're going to focus on overthrowing the monarchy or doing something that a medieval knight could actually do. Um, there are sort of limits to you can and can't do, even if we're maybe more flexible than actual history. Um, I guess practice. Maybe I'll practice sort of with Kate, pretend Kate is a delegate. Hopefully you guys are familiar with The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's about the meatpacking district here in Chicago, actually, and about the working conditions for the meatpacker workers. Obviously, it very famously, we learned this in A Push, he aimed for, well, again, let's not get into The Jungle. Basically, it exposed sort of how gross the meatpacking industry really was, and it led to such a public outcry that President Theodore Roosevelt created the Food and Drug Administration. So, if you were to be a delegate on the creation of the FDA committee, which is a real committee that we would run, what are some of the problems that would be facing the committee, and what sort of ways would you try to work against that? Kate, do you have any ideas?
Ideas about like what problems might be facing committee.
Or about how, obviously the problems, well, let's think, the problems would be sort of how to provide
Sanitation.
food safety, yeah,
Yeah.
how to keep, meat workers from losing fingers into the sausage mix or whatever.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
whatever,
Like you
let's
said,
skip that.
safety,
So
sanitation.
yeah, health and safety,
Um,
sanitation. Um, but what are some ways you would go about undermining the FDA?
hmm. I don't, I don't know what to say. That would might be Munich friendly. I know what I would do in Chauvelin. Uh,
Yeah,
let's say, maybe like trying to, like, this sounds kind of crazy, but like privatize the FDA, or
yeah,
like create your own like private organization, like contracted by the government. Like create some
yeah,
sort of like problem, like accuse the commissioner of the FDA of doing something problematic and being like, oh, like see, like, but we have like a clean company, like we're doing whatever, like you should outsource to us and we'll like we'll watch over whatever's going on. Or like you as a delegate can try to take control of the FDA, whether that's like directly as being like elected the commissioner or something, or like indirectly by basically being like the puppet master. So, or if you don't want the FDA to be created and you're like, no, I want to keep being shady in my business practices, you can try to like bring it down through some like internal conflict.
yeah. You can also think about ways to sort of resource build uh, through by working against committee. For instance, if the FDA, because the standards would be higher and creating higher standards, the cost of meat would go up. So you could run a cheap meat smuggling ring. I don't know. There are basically a lot of sort of ways to go about it. Any sort of committee, they're always each committee has a pretty clear goal of where they want to go. There's always a way to cut against the grain, um, no matter even if it's the FDA. Um, all right, working against committee. When writing backroom notes, you guys should be seeking to work against committee. Um, Basically, how are you going to create issues for all your fellow delegates who you want to work with in front room, but how do you want to create issues for them to deal with? Um, Being able to consistently work against committee is essential for breaking in the front room. Obviously, we just discussed how we can work against committee in the FDA. But as soon as you get your assignments and your background guides, you will see what the issues of committee are. And you may get a sense even during the beginning of people's speeches, what speeches they give, what the goals are. So you may get a sense of where committee is going to, the majority of committee is heading through their speeches. The people may give, that's not important. So you may be able to work against that based on your sense of where people's positions are based on their front room speeches. Um, Examples of working against committee. A good example is a note that seeks to create new problems for committee to solve. Example, overthrowing a king, that's a pretty big one. Creating a secessionist state, also pretty common, but that always breaks. Um, why do these work? Not only are these interesting, great ideas, but committee is forced to deal with them. If the chair is the king is assassinated, there's no way that that's not going to be a break. There's no way that committee will not, like that cannot happen off screen. You will not get a note that says, oh, the king was assassinated, and then you never see it. You will see that in front room. Um, Bad example is notes sometimes even if they're broken, do not really create new issues for committee. It's just, oh, here's an odd curiosity that's going on. And then committee's like, doesn't really need to respond to it because it's just, oh, interesting. And then nothing happens. Um, Examples, creating a pet store for committee, that might be a break. That might be a little part of a break because it's fun. Making contact with the rival country, that could maybe lead into something greater. But in and of itself, as we say, these ideas could be a setup for a bigger note, but on their own, they could be ignored by committee and may not even be broken in the first place. Um, so yeah, in terms of scale and scope and sort of significance, these are also important things to take into consideration. Um, Finally, asking for feedback. Always, always, always ask for day's feedback. We tell at MUNUC, our goal is pedagogy. It's teaching you guys about issues, about public speaking, about cooperation. Chair and CD feedback are an essential part of improving at MUN, probably maybe the most essential part, especially for non-trad committees. CD feedback allows you to gauge your art progress. Um, I know certainly different CDs have different styles of feedback. I am perfectly willing to sort of, as a CD, I was always willing to sort of tell delegates where I think their art could be strengthened, how they could try to achieve their art. Like maybe some CDs won't be willing to do that, but it doesn't hurt to ask, and we can be a pretty helpful bunch. Um, Generally, day's feedback will happen at the end of the day or between committee sessions, maybe even both on some of the longer days. In terms of what you can ask your CD, what do you think of my last note, or really any note? Do you want more or less detail on my notes? Is the direction of my art clear? That's maybe the most important one, because if your CD and your AC do not know where your direction of the art is clear, then it's sort of hard for them to help you. If as a CD you know where a delegate's arc is going, even if the note is a little bit of a mess, you can still sort of gain a sense based on that prior knowledge about what they're really trying to do. So this is really kind of important. It cannot be understated, the importance. And how do you think um, my arc fits with your vision for committee? Um, Kate, do you have any advice on how to ask for feedback, really, besides don't be afraid?
Yeah. Yeah, like you just said, don't be afraid. Your CDs are like very nice people. Like at MUNUC, like we make sure that we choose execs that are like approachable for delegates and like really care about the mission in MUNUC. And like Jillian said, like our mission is pedagogy. So like we're here for you. We brand ourselves as a learning conference. So like there's no shame like whatsoever if like you're apprehensive of like going up to your dais and like asking them for that feedback. Because like they're there to help you. Like they want to see you learn, they want to see you grow. Like we interview them to see like if they should be execs, and most of them, like an overwhelming majority of them, say that the reason why they do MUNUC is because they want to see you all learn and grow, and it's such an amazing experience. So like of course, like go up to them, ask, like you can ask any of these questions. You can also like ask anything else that you're curious about. Something that I wish delegates would ask more is like, do you like understand what I'm trying to do? Because sometimes I think I told this story last time, but there was like we do these things called arc reveals at the end, and sometimes people will like say something during the arc reveal, and I'm like, I did not know you're trying to do that. Like that is not how I interpreted your arc. So if you feel like there's any room possibly that like the CD is like misinterpreting your arcs, you can definitely like ask them about that and see if like that's what they're getting from it. You also like will have the opportunity to talk to your ACs, like if people are responding to your notes. Um, so like say you got like a response or something that like kind of confused you or like didn't align with something that you had received earlier, you also can ask them about that. Like of course don't do it in a way that's like combative and like attacking them, but like do like ask them like gently like, oh, I noticed that like you had granted me something earlier, but now you said I don't have it. Like, why is this the case? And then they can like explain, like course correct and be like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Yeah, just like anything that you would want to ask, just ask. Like I couldn't think of any question that they wouldn't ask unless it was related to like, will you break me? Which is something actually that you shouldn't ask. Don't ask your
Yeah.
CDs to like break you in the future, or like, oh, like will you like definitively break this note? As a CD, like that
Yeah.
makes me more likely not to do it. So just like don't ask that. Instead, ask one of these other questions, and then they might be more like happy with you and be like, you know what, they did a good job. Like they're asking me about this. Like I'm gonna break them. Like that's like the one thing to stay away from. Don't ask them to break you. But other than that, anything is good.
Yeah, it's also quite hard sometimes to make those promises, and we generally don't like to do it just because things change so rapidly in MUN with directives, with notes, that we have a plan of what our breaks can look like 3 breaks down the line, and then it's totally different. So yeah, don't ask that. Instead, work with us. Let us work with you so you can develop an arc that is breakable. Yeah. All right, next steps. What's next for MUNUC Academy? So we have Thanksgiving next week, and then we go into sort of our finals week crunch time. Then we have winter. So basically, MUNUC Academy will resume in January, so you guys can take a break from watching us on Zoom webinar. In week 6, obviously tomorrow, the traditional track is back with their presentation. I don't know what it's on, to be quite honest, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. Um, in week 6, the non-traditional track, well, whoever's doing that will be back with merges and blocks in non-traditional MUN. Obviously, we talked about directives earlier, so this is more detail about directives. And the traditional track will be back with clauses, working papers, and merging. So if you're really into merging, then week 6 will be the week for you. As always, if you want to have any questions, I'd refer to your email for future training sessions and for the schedule of what MUNUC Academy is going to be. I think we have about 4 or 5 weeks left before conference of MUNUC Academy. We have more 5 weeks before that. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we are going to check for some questions. Is there a way to get these slides? Like, is it on the MUNUC website? These, I believe that what happens is this webinar, which is being recorded right now, I think, will be posted on MUNIC's YouTube channel. So like and subscribe, please. It'll be posted within like a week or so, and then you can review this. And you can even mute us, so you can just look at the slides if you don't want to hear us yap. Yes, it was mentioned in a previous meeting that you can find the recordings on YouTube. The channel name is, I believe it is Malda United Nations, University of Chicago. It is sort of our full name. I think if you just type in MUNUC, MUNUC, it should, the channel should show up. We have our blue logo, pretty clear. How do we get selected for a crisis? That takes place on your end with your advisor. So I'm not really sure how that registration process works. But non-traditional committees are very fun. So I would talk to your advisor if you want to take part in that. We have another question. I'm always a little paranoid that when creating alliances, others will spill what I'm doing. Is it likely for my plans to be leaked? That is definitely, that can happen, to be honest. Especially with JPD. Kate, have they covered JPDs? Yeah. So that is always, you do
No,
always have a
not
risk.
yet.
Oh, you have not.
That's coming.
Okay,
Don't
so
worry.
JPDs are coming, where those are basically where you collaborate on kind of a note with another committee, or not with another committee, sorry, with another delegate, where you collaborate on doing stuff in backroom. And look, MUN can be a sort of, it's supposed to be a collaborative space, but obviously people have disagreements, and that can happen. But I think you shouldn't obviously with your notes will never be, well, can I tell them about note burning?
Yeah, sure.
So basically, it is one thing that could happen is there could be a delegate who their a thing they do in their notes is to set up a spy network, and then they can ask to get snippets of other people's notes, and your thing could be exposed that way. So a good way to protect against that is simply by writing at the end of your notes, make sure to burn this note. And that means that if another delegate has like a spy network that they're developing in their art, they will not be able to look at your notes or look at snippets of your notes. But your notes will certainly never be leaked. And even if your notes are broken into Frontroom, the crisis directors and ACs will be, they are told not to dox you guys. We make that very clear with them. Yeah. How many crises will there be? So there are 10 non-traditional committees at MUNUC 37. That's the year we're on. There will be 5 crisis committees and 5 hybrid committees. You can find the list of the committees on our website, munic.org.
There's also
We're all really excited. There's also the ad hoc, so that takes the form of a crisis committee, yes. There are actually 11 non-traditional committees. The way the ad hoc works is you don't get the background guide until 3 days before. So it's quite a intense type of thing. Yeah, but we're very excited about our committees. I'm especially excited about my hybrid committees because hybrids are the best. My execs have worked very hard and very proud of them. But yes. All right. If there are no further, oh, we got another question. Is it possible to pass too many directives? Also, is there such a thing as a bad directive? It is possible to pass too many directives, or it's possible to submit too many directives, and that's why chairs will often, basically the reason why you could submit too many directives is because the crisis director has to read through all your directives in not that much time, figure out what they're doing, what are the issues, potential issues with them, and plan a crisis break in like 5 minutes. So it's very sort of compressed and hectic on the crisis director's end. But if they're getting like 10 directives, that's just simply not going to work. They can't, no human being can do that. So that is why generally the chair will put in a directive cap, usually 3 or 4, but it really is up to the chair's discretion. There can be such thing as a bad directive if it does not really address the issue at hand. You can sometimes tell if your directive was not, the directive that was passed was not very good, if the issue that was in the previous crisis break gets worse in the next crisis break. That's how you can tell that your directive did not really address it to the satisfaction of the crisis director. So yes, unfortunately, there is such a thing as, I wouldn't say bad directive, but a not quite good enough directive. That is a thing that exists, unfortunately. All right.
But may I add something real quick?
Yes, yes.
On the question of passing too many directives, Julian, of course, answered that very beautifully, but there's another aspect of the issue to consider, which is like, are there 2 directives that have been passed that are like that are basically against each other, that are like undoing what the other one does? Because it gets kind of confusing if like there's a directive passed, say it's like FDA, right? Say one of them passed is like, oh, well, we have to limit the workday to like 10 hours, and like put like age restrictions or something. And then say the other one is like, oh no, but like we have to like increase it to 12 hours. That might be too many directives passed because only one of them hypothetically should have been passed, although like we would never limit that. And then yeah, in that case also it kind of wouldn't be like a not so good directive because like one of them is combating the other. So it's a little difficult, and then you could expect a very confusing crisis break as the next one for that. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, if they're redundant, like if you have 2 directives that are basically doing the same thing, like that can happen because delegates are very proud and they want to be the one, and when they want to have their directive. That's why it's important to merge, which we will talk about next week, week 6. So come back for that. But yes, if they're redundant or contradictory, that can be an issue. Um, yeah. All right. Kate, I don't know how to end. Oh, we got another question. What are good questions to ask in crisis? In the past, I asked more informative questions like how many troops do I have? I want to get better at asking questions. Um, one thing in crisis, either in whether it's asking a question after a crisis break or in during a note, is that we will never give you a specific number. So how many troops you have, you would never get you'd get like a good amount or a lot, but you would never get, we have 60 men on here and 50 there. So generally don't ask for specific numbers because we won't give that to you because we don't need you to get bogged down in the numbers. Um, Sort of thinking about things that if in a note, asking for questions about what is like the status of something that you may have sent forth in the past that will advance your arc, asking questions about what's the situation on the ground in ways that like affect your plans and your end goals. In terms of asking questions after crisis breaks, things like basically anything asking for more detail, more information is always good. Kate, do you have anything to add on this matter?
Yeah, I think like Julian said, like asking for like more details is better. Also, like if there's something that is confusing, it's probably made that way because the crisis director is trying to like cause problems. So like don't be afraid to ask them to clarify or to repeat something. Like they should be giving like a TLDR at the end of the crisis break. So like hopefully that should clarify a little bit like the big points they want you to take away. But if there is something that like is confusing you or seems contradictory, like of course ask. Um, Also like if there's like a group of people that you're worried about like that aren't sort of like mentioned in the break, like say it's like oh like the oh wait sorry okay what I'm thinking more of is like sentiment, so like how like the people are responding to this like break. Sentiment can be very important, like they won't necessarily give you a direct answer, but like it can be like oh like some people are upset, some people like this, and then that can give you like a spur for how to like address that later on. So yeah, I would say sentiment is
Or I would also add if you worked on something in a directive, it would be, and then you feel like it was maybe not picked up on in the next crisis break, sort of asking what was the impact of this thing we just passed in our directive? That's always a great question to ask, because then the CD will give you sort of a more direct answer about what it did do or what it didn't do. So that can be very valuable. All right. If there are no further questions, um, we will end the webinar. Kate, do you know how to end the webinar?
yeah I can end it, but yeah if y'all have like any more questions you can
Yeah,
always like email your USG. You can also like
exactly.
put them in the little comment section once this is uploaded to YouTube. um yeah
Yes. Remember to like and subscribe
yes hit
our
that
to our YouTube
notification
channel.
bell.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for coming out. Yeah. Um, yeah, so of course contact Yurishi. Thank y'all so much for being here. Um, Big thank you to Mr. Julian for leading this and like being able to enlighten y'all about this topic. So yeah,
Thank you, Kate, for the help
Julian, it's
with
okay.
all this.
Yes,
All
but thank
right.
y'all so much and have a nice week. Have a nice weekend. Like enjoy your lives until we see you again in January. And of course, if you're counting the days towards Munich, we are also counting down the days towards Munich. So we will see y'all in a few months. Bye.
Bye-bye.